Right, now we return to one of our top stories today. You'd have heard a short while ago the African Union Peace and Security Council has suspended Sudan from all AU activities. And for the latest on the situation in Sudan, we're now joined via Skype by Foreign Affairs journalist Peter Fabricius. Peter, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hi, yeah, we're great. So I suppose the AU had to take action at some point, and sadly only after 108 people had been killed.
Yeah, it did have to, I think, because it had already given them the military transitional military council a deadline to hand over power to civilian authority of about 2 months, which I think was due any moment now. And as we've seen, the Transitional Military Council has said that they're basically going to hold elections in 9 months and hang on to power till then. So they were very clearly in breach of the AU Peace and Security Council decision. But as you say, that's not much comfort for the families of the protesters who've been killed this week. And so it would have been, there should have been far more decisive action by the African Union.
All right, so take us to how we got to Monday in particular. There was this negotiations taking place between the protest movement and the military authorities, and everybody was hopeful that some kind of agreement would be had, but things seem to have fallen apart now. How did we get to that point?
Yeah, I think ultimately the problem has just been all along that the military doesn't want to cede power. These negotiations have been going on for weeks, and there have been all kinds of permutations that have been put on the table. But ultimately it comes down, as you would expect in a situation like that, to who actually has the ultimate power. Who has the greater power in the transition, the military or the civilians? The civilians insisted that they should, the military insisted that they should, and eventually when that came to the crunch, then sadly violence erupted, and it's quite difficult to see how they're going to get back onto negotiations from here.
So with the AU suspending Sudan, what might happen? Might Sudan dig in its heels and say, well, we're just going to carry on doing things our way, or will they be forced to step back?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's probably not very clear either way, because the power of suspension, has force, of course. I mean, the country doesn't want to be out of favor with the rest of the African Union, but I'm not so sure it's going to be a strong enough incentive to bring the military back into line and to cancel their plans to abandon the negotiations and to hold elections in 9 months' time. So I think there's going to have to be more diplomacy for sure, and possibly, I don't know if there's any other diplomatic sanctions that they could impose, but I think the AU is going to have to keep up the pressure.
What about inside the country now? The protest action was what toppled Bashir in the end. Surely the same protests would put intolerable pressure on the military that's in charge now.
Yeah, the question being, is it intolerable or not? What we have quite often seen in these transitions, I mean, Egypt is a classic case where they're quite happy to sacrifice someone like Hosni Mubarak as a sort of figurehead, if you like, of the military. But when it comes down to the crux of sacrificing military control per se, that's when they tend to dig in their heels. So it's obviously a test for the protesters. Will they come back into the streets? Will they risk their lives, having lost so many this week? And if they do, that pressure may, as you say, ultimately prevail. But it's certainly the military has raised the stakes tremendously, with the killing of, I mean, the estimates vary between sort of 40 and 100, and bodies being hauled out the Nile and so on. It's got pretty ugly.
So, who's in charge of Sudan right now? We hear characters such as this warlord Hemeti being very influential. We're hearing that the Janjaweed are involved as well. Who is at the center of the strikes on civilians this past week?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't think that's 100% clear. I mean, obviously, we know that officially General Al-Burhan is in charge, but there have been all along suggestions of quite serious divisions within the military establishment. And some of these other forces, the ones you mentioned, the Janjaweed, who are now called the Rapid Response Forces, are suspected of having had a pretty negative agenda all along, and to have been responsible for some of the attacks on the protesters. You know that there were also clashes between security forces at various points, and they seem to have been on the hardline side of that spectrum. So it's not absolutely clear, but in any case, Burhan has actually, if it's pressure coming from them, the Janjaweed, in any case, he's conceded to the point of now calling off the negotiations, and imposing a unilateral transitional arrangement on the negotiators, on the civilian protesters. So I guess in the end it comes to the same thing.
All right, and then perhaps finally, South Sudan having its own issues and drama playing out. Might they be sucked into this instability in Khartoum?
I'm not sure how it impacts upon them, except to the degree that, quite oddly, I mean, this was under Bashir himself, was playing quite a significant role in trying to mend the broken relations between the factions in South Sudan, and that's been suspended. But there is some danger of that, I guess, but there's no signs of it as yet.
All right. Peter, thanks very much. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed for your insights.